I didn't get it wrong. I don't think I got anything wrong. I think one of the things that, slowed my momentum down.
Listen, before we start, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear isn't just another celebrity story. This is about a man who created one of the most iconic phrases in American history. Watch two superstars throw real punches on $1 million movie set, got locked out of the very party that should have celebrated him, and at 60 years old finally decided he's done keeping quiet. Bill Bellamy just pulled the pin on 3 decades of silence, and what he's revealing is shaking Hollywood to its core. So what exactly did he say that has everyone frozen? And why did it take him 30 years to finally speak? Stay with me, because this gets deep. April 7th, 1965. Newark, New Jersey. If you know anything about Newark in the 60s and 70s, you know it wasn't the kind of place where dreams felt possible. This was survival territory. Sirens were the soundtrack. Poverty, racial discrimination, street violence, these weren't occasional problems, they were the air people breathed. Getting home safely after school was considered lucky. Having electricity all month was a win. And in that environment, William Bellamy was born as the eldest child, carrying weight most kids never have to touch. But here's where his story splits from everyone else around him. While his neighbors were just trying to survive, Bill's parents made a decision that would change everything. They scraped together whatever they could and got him into Seton Hall Preparatory School, one of the most prestigious private high schools in New Jersey. Think about that contrast. Families around him couldn't keep the lights on. Bill was walking into classrooms with kids whose parents owned vacation homes. The culture shock must have been brutal, but it planted something in him, a vision of what life could be if you refused to accept limitations. He goes to Rutgers University, economics major. Everything's mapped out perfectly, right? Study hard, get the degree, land the corporate job, buy the house, raise the family, live the safe, predictable life everyone expected. His parents breathed easier thinking their son had escaped the streets. But every single night, after those proper study hours were done, Bill would slip out. He'd drive to these tiny clubs, places with maybe 50 seats, dim amber lighting, the smell of old beer soaked into brick walls. And there, he'd do something that made him feel more alive than any classroom lecture ever could. He'd stand in front of strangers and try to make them laugh. When they laughed, he could breathe. When they went silent, he knew he had to dig deeper, be sharper, push harder. That feedback loop became his addiction. Not the applause, but the challenge. The constant need to prove himself night after night after night. Before long, those Jersey clubs weren't enough. He started taking bigger risks, driving into New York City, the heart of American performance art. He stepped onto the stage at the Improv, appeared at the comic strip, slowly worked his way into the Comedy Store. These weren't just venues. These were temples where every major name had stood before becoming famous. But here's what makes his story real. He had nobody backing him. No manager opening doors, no family money cushioning the fall, no industry connections making calls, just him, his material, and the audience. Some nights they loved him. Other nights, crickets. Those silent drives home were brutal, sitting there in the dark wondering if he was delusional, if he should just quit and take that economics degree to Wall Street like everyone expected. Then the turning point arrived faster than he could have imagined. A producer from HBO noticed him at Showtime at the Apollo, that notoriously tough audience that could make or break you in seconds. Bill killed. And suddenly Russell Simmons himself came to watch him perform at the Uptown Comedy Club in New York. This wasn't just any night. This was the audition Bill didn't even know he was taking. He had this new bit he'd been working on, something he'd scribbled on a piece of paper backstage about late-night phone calls, about that unspoken understanding between people, about desire compressed into 2 simple words. He brought it on stage just to test it. The room exploded. Russell Simmons didn't just laugh, he locked eyes with Bill and said, "I want you on Def Comedy Jam, and I want you to do that joke." 1992, HBO's Def Comedy Jam. This wasn't a regular comedy show. This was the platform that put black comedians on the national map. To stand on that stage meant you had triumphed over thousands who only wished for a single chance. Bill stepped out wearing an oversized shirt, that mischievous smile, an energy that pulled the entire room toward him. And when he delivered that line, booty call, the crowd didn't just laugh, they erupted. It wasn't just the joke, it was the way Bill told it. Clear, bold, sexy without being vulgar, playful yet clever. Nobody in that room knew they were witnessing the birth of a cultural phenomenon. Within weeks, that phrase had escaped the club walls. It showed up in barbershops, high school hallways, college dorms, underground tracks, then MTV, then radio, then everywhere. Over 30 television shows used it. Friends, Martin, Fresh Prince, Living Single, all of them. Movies, too many to count. Hundreds of hip-hop and R&B songs. There was even an entire romantic comedy titled Booty Call in 1997, starring Jamie Foxx and Vivica Fox, that became an icon of the era. The phrase went from slang to mainstream to dictionary to dating culture. 30 years later, Gen Z is still using it on their phones. Bill Bellamy had created something that would outlive him. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Picture this. It's the early 90s. Def Jam is throwing their annual Christmas party. This isn't just any party. This is the kingdom. The place every black artist, from rappers to comedians, dreams of entering to feel like they truly belong. And Bill, the man who had just created Booty Call, the phrase spreading across America like wildfire, the man who had exploded on Def Comedy Jam just months earlier, he gets an invitation, or at least he thought he did. He dresses neatly, walks toward the door, heart pounding, ready to blend into a room full of legends. And then what happens next cuts into him like a cold blade. The doorman looks at the list, flips through a few lines, looks up and says, "You're not on here." Bill thought it was a mistake. Impossible, right? He had just put Def Jam on another level with his performance. MTV was calling. His buzz was undeniable, but to that doorman he was just another unfamiliar face trying to get in. And then, as if to rub salt into the wound, the people behind him walked right through without a single question. Jay-Z breezes past like air. Mary J. Blige and her whole crew straight in. LL Cool J doesn't even break stride. Their names flew out of that doorman's mouth like pre-programmed VIP codes. And Bill Bellamy, the man who had made all of America laugh with Booty Call, the man who had appeared on the HBO stage, who had given Def Jam one of its most viral moments, he was kept outside like someone trying to sneak into a party he didn't belong at. Bill stood there trying to keep it together, forcing a smile, but inside he was burning. Years later, at 60 years old, when he tells this story, his voice no longer laughs. It sinks like he's touching a wound that never healed. When they wouldn't let me in, he says, I felt like I was nobody. That's not a throwaway line, that's a man revisiting the moment his illusion shattered. For months he had believed he was becoming part of the inner circle, the temple of black entertainment, Def Jam, hip-hop culture, urban showbiz royalty. But that night reality hit him square in the face. They didn't know him. They didn't see him. They didn't consider him one of them. And what made it worse was standing there watching the very people he admired walk past him like he was invisible. But here's what gives this moment its true power. That humiliating night became the fuel for Bill Bellamy's entire career. When he walked away from that door, he wasn't just angry. He made a vow, a simple vow, but so powerful he remembers it word for word to this day. There will never be another day in my life where people don't know who I am. And he meant every syllable. From that moment on, Bill didn't perform like someone seeking a chance. He performed like someone seeking revenge, like someone determined to prove every underestimating eye wrong, like someone shoved out of heaven and set on building his own. He took more shows, wrote harder, crushed every stage he stepped on, not content to simply stand in the room, but determined to be the one the entire room rose for. That's why Booty Call was never just a joke. It was the result of a vow. It was proof. It was vindication. But if that humiliation was painful, what came next was a battle that would simmer for 3 decades. Let's talk about the truth behind Booty Call, because this is where Bill's frustration runs deepest. For over 30 years, since that phrase first echoed on Def Comedy Jam in 1992, Bill has had to hear countless rumors, fabricated stories, people intentionally, or not giving someone else credit. Some claimed it was Atlanta slang that existed before him. Others insisted it came from hip-hop in the 80s. There were long forum essays arguing Bill merely popularized it, didn't create it. But at 60 years old, Bill finally looked straight into a camera and said with absolute clarity, "I wrote it. I said it first." This wasn't a punchline, it was a declaration of ownership. He remembers exactly when it was born. Backstage at the Uptown Comedy Club, a small scrap of paper, thinking about how guys called girls late at night, the sudden meetups, youthful desire compressed into 2 words that were sexy, funny, mischievous, and real. When Russell Simmons saw it, he didn't just laugh, he knew immediately this was different. But the bitter part for Bill wasn't that the phrase became huge, it was that people began forgetting the origin. And worse, some actively tried to erase it. One time someone asked him directly, "Are you sure you made it up?" I heard it came from, and Bill laughed, but his eyes went cold. You could see it. The years of frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. And now at 60, he finally admits, "Those rumors bothered me for years. Not because I want to own everything, but because I want the truth to be respected." Think about what that means. This wasn't ego. This was about legacy. An artist lives on ideas. A comedian lives on moments of eruption. Every joke is a small personal achievement. Every creation an imprint. And Booty Call was the defining imprint of his career, the moment that made all of America know his name. To have people dispute it, minimize it, attribute it to some vague cultural osmosis, that's not just annoying, it's erasure. When Bill explains why he stayed silent for decades, he drops a line that freezes every debate. "I didn't say anything because I thought it would explain itself. But then I realized, if you don't protect your legacy, someone will come along and take it." That hits different, doesn't it? Because it's not about being petty, it's about being forgotten while you're still alive. It's about watching your own creation get credited to ghosts. And here's the kicker. Even after Bill spoke his truth publicly, that lingering question remained. If Booty Call, his most iconic creation, was disputed and minimized for so long, how many other things in Bill Bellamy's life have been distorted, hidden, or misunderstood? And that question leads us straight into the next reveal, the one that shows Hollywood isn't as glamorous as the posters make it seem. 1999, the set of Any Given Sunday, Oliver Stone's iconic football drama. The cast was stacked. Al Pacino, Cameron Diaz, Jamie Foxx, LL Cool J, Dennis Quaid, and Bill Bellamy standing right in the middle of all that testosterone and ego. They were filming a stadium scene, hundreds of extras, cameras sweeping, actors getting into character. The energy was intense, competitive, exactly what you'd expect from a movie about professional football. But beneath all that controlled chaos, something real was brewing. Days of trash talk between Jamie Foxx and LL Cool J. Fear started playful. Jamie kept teasing LL about whether he'd ever played real football. LL would counter saying he was on tour at 16, 17, "You were coming to see me, just guys snapping on each other, right?" Except LL wasn't the type to keep playing when the jokes got under his skin. Bill noticed it. He even pulled Jamie aside and warned him, "Yo, stop messing with L. I'm telling you, that's my dude. He don't play like that. Do what you want, but I'm warning you, he ain't that one." Jamie brushed it off, said it was all fun and games. Then they shot a scene where their characters were arguing. LL smacked Jamie's helmet right over his ear hole, making his ear ring. Jamie snapped back, "Damn, man, you didn't have to do that, what's up?" LL dismissed it, saying he was just acting, but Bill could feel the tension crackling like electricity. He tried to diffuse it, pushing Jamie out of the way, talking to both of them, trying to calm everyone down. But it was too late. The third time they went to film that scene, Jamie turned around and punched LL right in the face, splitting his lip open. LL wasn't wearing a helmet, and when that punch landed, Bill said LL's entire demeanor changed. He was so mad it seemed like he was growing. His voice dropped, everything about him shifted. LL looked at Jamie and said, "On everything I love, ain't nothing you gonna do to stop what's about to happen to you." Then LL snatched Jamie's helmet off and threw an uppercut that knocked Jamie Foxx out cold. Not acting. Real violence. Jamie had to go to the hospital, 16 stitches in his tongue where he bit it. Bill stood there, frozen like a statue. He said later, I thought I would never get my lines back. One punch didn't just knock Jamie backward, it knocked Bill completely out of his performance zone. But what makes this a true reveal isn't just the fight, it's what it exposed about Hollywood. This industry runs on ego, not artistry. The people you see smiling on talk shows, laughing at red carpets, posing for magazine covers, many of them are one insult away from throwing real punches on a multi-million-dollar film set. And here's the twist. Behind the curtain, nobody considers it wrong the way the public imagines. It's men competing, defending pride, literally with their fists. The next day, LL Cool J flew in 85 people from New York, from Queens and Brooklyn to guard his trailer. Jamie had a handful. Production shut down for days. The tension was so thick, nobody knew if the movie would even finish. It took NFL legend Jim Brown to mediate, calling a meeting like he was bringing the Crips and Bloods together. Bill calls that moment his education in Hollywood's dark masculinity, a place where egos are so massive, nobody backs down, where the roles may be fake, but the rage is always real. Now let's talk about what happened after the industry shifted. Bill came up in the golden era of Def Comedy Jam, where comedians were allowed to be bold, talking about sex, politics, race, society without filters. Audiences came to hear truth, raw and unfiltered. But then 2004 happened. Janet Jackson's Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction. A fraction of a second that somehow became a national moral crisis. And everything changed. Bill remembers that time as complete chaos. The whole world went crazy, he says. They wouldn't allow any questionable words. I had to sign paperwork just to be interviewed. Think about that. A comedian, someone whose entire career depends on language, required to sign a no profanity agreement just to do a radio interview. No bad words, no sensitive topics, no suggestive jokes, not even slang. Radio stations warned him, if you slip up with one wrong word, we pay the fine, not you. This wasn't just inconvenient. It revealed something deeper. Fear had infected the art form. When a comedian has to read a contract before speaking, creative freedom, the soul of stand-up, gets suffocated. But what makes this truly revealing isn't just censorship, it's how black artists suffer more than anyone else. Bill speaks plainly about it. In showbiz, black entertainers get scrutinized harder, judged harsher, watched more closely. Hollywood's own history proves it. Small scandals involving white artists often get softened or dismissed. Identical mistakes by black performers become national crises. To Bill, the Janet Jackson scandal is the perfect example. Janet was vilified, her career damaged for years. Justin Timberlake, standing on that exact same stage, barely touched. And Bill witnessed how that shift seeped into comedy. One mistake by a black star can make all of us pay. When he describes being forced to sign that agreement, you hear the bitterness in his voice. A comedian who built his career on words, now having to dim his own light to fit an industry gripped by fear. For someone who exploded on the least censored comedy stage in American history, Def Comedy Jam, it's a painful irony. And the scarier part, cancel culture doesn't just punish the past, it threatens the future. Bill says it outright. Young comedians aren't brave enough to tell the truth anymore. Every joke must be measured, every topic softened, every risk avoided from a mile away. And when comedy loses its courage, it loses its soul. Now here's where Bill touches on something even heavier, something most entertainers won't go near. When he starts talking about Bill Cosby, you feel the energy shift immediately. This isn't a topic anyone wants to handle. But Bill chooses honesty. He says Cosby was once nearly a perfect role model. For generations of black performers, Cosby wasn't just a star. He was proof that a black entertainer could lead American television. The Cosby Show hit 30 million viewers weekly, a number nearly impossible today, even with streaming and the internet. So when the scandal broke, the shock shook childhood memories of an entire generation. But then Bill shares something that makes people pause. Everything erupted right when Cosby was closer than ever to buying NBC, a deal that could have shifted the balance of power in American entertainment forever. Bill doesn't say the events were connected. He doesn't make accusations. But his tone, that slight pause, the way he looks away before saying right when he was about to buy NBC, it's enough for anyone listening to understand he's touching on something veteran black entertainers have whispered about for years. Hollywood has games outsiders never see. The power of this moment isn't just in the content, it's in what Bill reveals about the fears black performers carry. He describes Cosby as a massive cultural pillar, then immediately touches on the deepest anxiety, that the career of a black entertainer, no matter how monumental, can be wiped out in moments they don't control. And he delivers this calmly, never forcing anyone to think a certain way, just leaving space. And that space grips viewers harder than any accusation could. Many who followed entertainment in the 80s and 90s remember the NBC acquisition was once a story that shook the industry. A black artist owning a major network wouldn't just shatter ceilings, it could usher in an entirely new era of representation and power. And then, within months, everything collapsed. Bill doesn't claim anything definitive, but he leaves behind one haunting question. Was it all just coincidence? That question doesn't need an answer. Its power comes from simply existing in the air, making people think harder about patterns they've seen, but never connected. There's something else you need to know about Bill's journey, something that adds even more weight to why he's speaking now. In the span of less than a month in 2022, Bill lost both his father William Bellamy Sr. and his father-in-law Bernard Baker Jr., two men who had shaped his life in ways beyond words. But what should have been a time of family unity became one of his most painful experiences. While Bill was out of the country, his sister Karen planned their father's funeral for June 24th, the exact same day Bill and his wife had already scheduled his father-in-law's service in a different state. Bill tried everything, even filing for a restraining order to change the date, but was denied. There was no legal standing for a judge to intervene in a family dispute. He was forced to choose. He chose to honor his father-in-law's service, the one that had been confirmed back in May. "I am devastated," Bill said, "that my family has to choose to miss one service for another. No one should ever have to be in this position. There are no words to express how disappointed I am to not be a part of laying my father to rest, but I look forward to celebrating my father's life and legacy with my wife, his grandchildren, and our close friends in our own time." That statement reveals something crucial about who Bill Bellamy is at 60 years old. This is a man who has spent decades navigating an industry that tried to diminish him, erase his contributions, and push him to the margins, even when he was creating culture-defining moments. And now, having lost his mother Edna back in 2017, his brother Julius in 2014, and both his father and father-in-law in 2022, Bill has reached a point where he's done being quiet. He's done letting other people write his story. He's done watching his legacy get twisted by rumors and half-truths. At 60, his children are grown. His career is solid enough that nobody can cancel him or shove him back into the MTV mold of his youth. And most importantly, he knows that if he doesn't tell these stories now, correctly and completely, nobody ever will. This is why when Bill speaks about the bad truths, he's not talking about personal scandals or gossip. He's talking about the ugly realities Hollywood has always tried to hide. How black artists were treated like temporary guests in a billion-dollar industry they helped build. How they were censored, sidelined, ignored even while standing at their peak. How a comedian who created one of the most iconic phrases in American culture had to fight for 3 decades just to get credit for his own work. How he watched real violence explode on a movie set and realized the glamour was a lie. How he was kept outside the very party that should have celebrated him, then used that humiliation as fuel to build a career that would make forgetting him impossible. How he stood at Def Comedy Jam alongside Bernie Mac, Dave Chappelle, Martin Lawrence, Chris Tucker, Jamie Foxx, and helped define an era of comedy that will never be replicated. How he interviewed Tupac Shakur for MTV and received handwritten letters from Rikers Island. How he became one of MTV's first VJs and helped shape how an entire generation experienced music and culture. How he starred in movies that became cultural touchstones like How to Be a Player and Love Jones and Any Given Sunday. Bill Bellamy's story isn't just about one man's career. It's about what happens when talent meets opportunity, but systemic barriers keep trying to minimize your impact. It's about the cost of being a black entertainer in an industry that profits from your creativity, but hesitates to give you full credit. It's about the courage it takes to finally speak your truth when you know it might make powerful people uncomfortable. And it's about legacy, about making sure that when the history books are written, your name is attached to the things you actually created. Because booty call wasn't just a phrase, it was lightning in a bottle. It was cultural alchemy. It was Bill Bellamy, at 27 years old, standing on a stage with nothing but a microphone and an idea, and that idea became part of how Americans talk about love and desire and late-night calls for the next 3 decades and counting. So when Bill says at 60 years old, I didn't say anything, because I thought it would explain itself. But then I realized, if you don't protect your legacy, someone will come along and take it. He's teaching every artist, every creator, every person who's ever made something meaningful a crucial lesson. Your silence will be filled by someone else's narrative. Your modesty will be mistaken for uncertainty. Your assumption that quality speaks for itself will be exploited by people who are louder, more aggressive, more willing to claim credit they didn't earn. Bill Bellamy spent 30 years being the good guy, the professional, the one who didn't make waves. And what did it cost him? It cost him watching his own creation get disputed. It cost him standing outside while others walked in. It cost him seeing the industry he helped build treat him like he was disposable. But here's what they didn't count on. Bill never forgot. He carried every slight, every dismissal, every moment of disrespect like stones in his pocket. And now, at an age where most people are thinking about retirement, Bill Bellamy is just getting started telling the whole truth. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about accuracy. It's about making sure the next generation of comedians, the next wave of black entertainers, the next kid from Newark who dreams bigger than his circumstances, knows the real story, knows that success doesn't mean you'll be treated fairly, knows that creating something iconic doesn't guarantee you'll get credit, knows that Hollywood will smile in your face while trying to minimize your contributions behind your back, but also knows that if you refuse to be silenced, if you document your truth, if you speak with clarity and conviction when the time is right, you can reclaim your narrative. You can correct the record. You can make sure that when people say booty call, they know exactly where it came from. They know it came from a piece of paper backstage at the Uptown Comedy Club. They know it was refined through countless performances in tiny venues. They know it exploded on Def Comedy Jam in 1992. And they know it came from the mind of William Bellamy from Newark, New Jersey, who refused to let his circumstances define his ceiling. That's the real story. That's what Bill Bellamy is finally saying out loud after 30 years of watching others try to write it for him. And that's why at 60 years old, he's not bitter, he's clear, he's not angry, he's determined. He's not looking back with regret, he's looking forward with purpose. Because the man who was once kept outside the Def Jam party now has his own podcast, his own platform, his own voice, reaching millions. The man who watched Jamie Foxx and LL Cool J throw real punches on a movie set now tells that story with the perspective of someone who survived Hollywood's chaos and came out stronger. The man who had to sign contracts just to do radio interviews now speaks freely about cancel culture and censorship and the double standards black artists face. The man whose legacy was disputed for decades now states plainly, without apology, without hesitation, I wrote it, I said it first, and that's the truth. So what exactly did Bill Bellamy reveal that has Hollywood frozen? He revealed that the game is rigged, but you can still win. He revealed that talent opens doors, but protecting your legacy requires vigilance. He revealed that being nice and professional and waiting your turn doesn't guarantee fairness. He revealed that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply tell the truth, clearly and completely, regardless of who it makes uncomfortable. And he revealed that at 60 years old, after burying both parents, after losing his brother, after navigating family conflicts that forced impossible choices, after surviving an industry that tried repeatedly to diminish him, Bill Bellamy is still here, still relevant, still creating, and finally ready to make sure his story is told correctly. Not by gossip sites, not by people with agendas, not by an industry that profits from rewriting history, but by him in his own words, with his own voice, setting the record straight once and for all. And that, more than anything else, is what makes this moment so powerful. Because Bill Bellamy isn't asking for permission anymore. He's not waiting for validation. He's simply speaking his truth and letting the chips fall where they may. And after 30 years of silence, that truth sounds a lot like thunder.